Hi, and welcome to It's in the Wind Studio. My name is Marcia Wilson-Holloway, and I am here to guide you through the process of creating your very own miniature found poetry book. This project can be done by anybody at any age, and you can use whatever you have available in your own home. Here's a little sample of one that I've made. It's got 4 pages. And you may have noticed that there's a little pocket in there with a little tag. Isn't that sweet? I can't wait to show you how to put it all together. Let's talk about some supplies we'll be needing. The first thing you're going to need is something to create your book out of. I will be using 8.5 by 11 copy paper, but you can use junk mail, old wrapping paper, scrapbook paper. You can even use an empty bag of sugar. I love to repurpose old shopping bags. And this is something I'm looking forward to working with for myself. This is a little art project I did with some students here at the studio, and I'm going to be using this as a background someday for one of my little books, but not today, because I want to give you some ideas of what you can do for backgrounds. So that's why we're going to start with the white background. So some of the other supplies you're going to be needing today is something to write with. You're going to need a pencil, and a pen would be handy as well. Mine actually is not bleed proof, so I'm going to play around with that a little bit and show you some fun things you can do. You're going to need glue. I use my glue stick, and I typically use a liquid glue as well. Anything that you have at home will work fine. As I go through this supply list, you will not need everything on here. I will not use all of these supplies, but I wanted to give you a variety in case you don't have something specific that I'm showing you. You can think outside the box and come up with something on your own. A few other things you're going to need is paper clips and or binder clips. You're going to need a pair of scissors, hole punch. If you don't have one of these, think of another creative way that you could create holes. You're going to need something to create color with. Some of the things you might have at home are colored pencils, crayons, markers. I have some fat markers, some skinny markers, highlighters. Those would be kind of fun, won't they? And these are one of my favorites. They're fat pencils with lots of colored leads in them, and you just never know what you're going to get with that. Something I won't be using today, but you certainly can at your own house. If you have some paint, watercolor paint, don't forget you're going to need a brush and a cup of water. You'll need something like string or yarn. Again, anything will do. A few other things that you can do in mixed media is add pieces of paper to your art, which is really fun to collage. So old tissue paper, again, wrapping paper would work great. Napkins, party napkins, these are great. I won't be using any of this today because I think maybe it's less likely that somebody will have them in their home. But be sure if you do use party papers, separate them. There's lots of layers. So what happens is if you glue down that first layer, the top one, the pretty one will not stick, and you'll have to put glue on it again. So it's best just to separate it from the start. If you forget, no big deal, just add another layer. All right, so here's a couple examples. I've got scrapbook, just bits and pieces of wrapping paper. I've got doily, which I love using. And then you're going to need something a little bit heavier for your little tags in your pockets. And a few things you could use is postcards, those little postcards that come out of magazines. They're a little bit thicker. You can use any kind of junk mail. This came from the cover of a scrapbook packet that I had. And these are old playing cards, and you could even use an old business card, an old greeting card. Anything will do. Again, you won't need all of these supplies, but it gives you an idea of the type of supplies that you're going to need. Let's get started. Take your sheet of paper and fold it in half. Once you have the crease the way you want it, open it up. Now we're going to fold that half in half. And do the same on the second side. You see, I'm trying to make sure that I have it fairly accurate. Now open up the sheet of paper, and now we're going to fold it the lengthwise. Again, being sure that the corners are matching so that my book is somewhat straight. Once you've done that, you're going to open it up and fold it back the other way so it's in half, and pull the folded edge towards you, and then you're going to make one cut up the center to that next fold. Now you can open up your sheet of paper, fold it lengthwise one more time, and you'll see there's an opening in the center. What you need to do is grab those two last pieces and squeeze it together. You can press it either way, whichever way feels right to you. You might have to straighten up some of the edges when you fold it because now there's more layers inside. At this point, I want to point out the fact that the folded edge is going to be the bottom of your book. So when you open up this sheet of paper, that folded edge in the middle with the slice is actually going to be the bottom. And so inside your sheet of paper, we're going to do some marking. The first thing we're going to do is write the word inside, so we know which one is out and which one is the inside of the book. Some papers, it will be obvious which one is inside, and you will not need to do this part. It also might be helpful to make a little arrow towards the center fold and write the word bottom. Now for the fun part. Our first layer, we are going to be adding color. You may have noticed that I flipped my paper over, so I am making my marks on the front of the paper. I've laid down my plastic bag that used to hold onions under my paper, and I'm coloring on top of that. It's like the rubbings that we used to do with pennies or leaves from trees. Again, there's all sorts of things that you can find in your own home to create texture on your book. As we add color to our book, remember that you might not have the same supplies as I do, so use whatever you have, whether it's markers or colored pencils. You can even use paint if you have that at home. At this point, I'm trying to remind myself that the center fold, where the slice is actually the bottom of my pages. There was a time when I was creating a book and I got very confused and forgot that the center part was the bottom. Just like I tell my students, I made friends with my little mistake. As we continue to work in color, I wanted to remind you on this first level, you can put more color on your pages than I am. I'm basically going around the outside edges and putting some texture on there And as you can see, my fun pencil is creating a variety of looks. You might use more than one pencil or texture on your background. The idea here is just to have fun and make it the way you want to make it. Now let's add a second layer to our background. You can do anything you want here. You can use pencils, pens, markers. Again, it's mixed media, so use your imagination and add whatever you want. You can see that I made some scribble marks with my my bleeding pen, and so I'm adding water to that just to soften up the edges. Now, of course, this is copy paper, so I don't want to add too much water, otherwise I'll wear out a hole in it. And I'm not really wanting holes. But as I said, you can make whatever design or decorations you want. You could even draw flowers or circles, squares, any kind of markings. For our third layer, you can see I'm bringing out my tissue papers. I just love all the fun, bright colors that you get to stick in your gift bags. So I've collected and chosen the flower print, but you can choose whatever you want. I like the combination of 3 different colors. So I've got one with patterns, I've got yellow and green. Now I'm just tearing up all the pieces to different sizes. If you don't want to tear your paper up, you can use scissors and cut. That's not a problem. Since this video is not sped up, you might be able to just work alongside me. That would be great. But if you need to pause it at any time, feel free to do that. So what I'm doing here is trying to remember that the middle part is actually the bottom. So if I have something that has a top, or I don't want it upside down, I don't want my flowers upside down, you can see I'm laying my red flowers with the bottom towards the middle. So it looks like it's upside down, but when I fold up my paper again and look at it, it will be right side up. That is one of the tricks with this book, is trying to remember that. Again, when I use my glue sticks, I like to put lots of layers on because otherwise it won't stick very well. I like to lay out my pieces, a few pieces at a time, and then kind of look to see if that's where I want them before I glue them on. Sometimes I just put the glue on and then I decide where it goes. So you see here, I'm not even putting it in the same spot as I had initially thought I was going to move it to. I put lots of flowers all around. I'm keeping in mind all of the separate panels where the folds are to make sure that I have flowers on each panel. And yes, you can see that I cover up some of my other colors, and that's okay. That's a part of mixed media, is you're layering layers on top of layers. As you can tell, this project can be quite time consuming. You may not want to spend this much time on your project. In that case, I would start out with something that already had a background. During the pandemic, I chose to use a scrapbook sheet of paper, and it worked really well to just add little bits and pieces of color instead of starting from scratch, as we're doing here. Now here I'm checking it to make sure I've got all the pieces I want. Did you notice the hazards of being an artist? I have band-aids on both hands. I'm going to add some more yellows and some greens. You can see that my fingers are very sticky. Things are not leaving my fingers very easily. So right there, I'm actually putting the tissue paper over my cut that I have in the center. Later on, you will see that I'm going to break that apart so that I can actually fold the book correctly. If you don't want to do that, you can certainly just avoid that area. Again, I'm using tissue paper, but you can use napkins or fun patterns from junk mail. There's so many fun things that you can do in mixed media, and I just love it. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. I used to be a lot pickier about my work and wanting it to be perfect, and this has just kind of let me free up my style, and it is a lot of fun. I love mixed media. A lot of times in my mixed media projects, I actually use paper that has text on it. It might be from a magazine or junk mail. I might even use an old sheet of music. So you see here's where I'm breaking open that opening again and folding it back up. Now what I'm doing is looking to make sure that I've got things on every page, that I've got enough color. I'm really pleased, especially with this page and how it looks. I'm thinking that this one's a little empty, so I'm going to add some more color to that. Now that I'm happy with what's going on in my book, I'm cleaning up my workspace and looking at all the pages, trying to decide which one is going to be my front. Then I go ahead and take a pencil and mark that so I don't forget, with a F and a B on the back top corner. Now we're going to decide about pockets. I decide on this one that I'm going to go with the pocket on the side, but you can certainly do something different. Maybe you want your pocket starting on the top. For this opening of my pocket, I'm going to go ahead and tear this out. I love the jagged edges of tearing, but don't be afraid to do something different and unique. Now I want to put something on the background on the inside of the book where my tag is going to be going. It's really helpful to make some marks on the inside so that you know exactly where to place your background color. So in this case, I end up deciding to take my little scrap that I tore out and gluing that in. Now, obviously, you don't have to do that. You can come up with another texture. Maybe you want to leave it white. Maybe you want to add some paint or some doodles or a contrasting color. Later on, you'll see that I actually end up coming back and adding some dark markers to the edge of that so that it does contrast between the two surfaces. Now you may decide that you want 3 or 4 or 5 pockets. I choose to leave this center part without a pocket, and then I try to decide which side of the top I want my pocket on. So here I'm going to open it up a different way. I'm going to snip using my scissors and fold over the edges. Now again, I want to add some color and contrast to the inside, so I make small markings and then I go ahead and open it up so I know exactly where to put my colors. the inside of the pocket is going to have green, but then I have those little flaps that I'm actually adding some flowers to. You may choose to do something different. In this case, I use one piece of tissue paper, so I go ahead and tear that edge. Of course, you're welcome to use scissors if you like a straighter edge, but as you can see, I like the fringes of tearing. I like the softer edges and not the harder edges. So you can do whatever you like. I just love the way that that turned out with the green. Such a great contrast with the white background and the little blue flowers. It almost looks like a shirt collar to me. Now again, all the edges on mine are torn. You may decide to take your scissors and cut those edges off. Now we're going to start gluing the other edges that we don't want things to fall out, and wherever we're not putting pockets. So again, you see my glue stick. I don't go over it once. I go over 2 or 3 or 4 times just to make sure I have a good coating. And then I'm going to secure those edges, pressing them down, making sure they're all lined up appropriately. Don't forget the bottom, that little snip that you did in the beginning. We're going to add lots of glue there to make sure that that is secure and closed. Now I'm showing you that paper clips or the binders is a good way to hold those edges closed. In my case, the glue sticks actually hold pretty securely, but if you're especially using those liquid glues, it's a really good idea to clamp that down to hold it, especially in the bottom and in the corners of the book, so that it stays shut. Thankfully, most people have paper clips in their home. I'm continuing to glue the edges that I need glued shut, and the book is almost all put together. I sure hope that you're enjoying this process. My friend taught me how to do this, and it has been something that I keep going back to time and time again. It's so much fun. You can spend as much time on there as you want. You could make a quick book out of the memory book paper. You know, you've already got the background, so all of these steps that we just did, maybe you're not going to do that, or maybe you will add some color to that background and design. Mixed media, you can have so many layers and so many textures. I just love it. So you can see here, I'm just confirming that all the edges are secure. I've got my paper clips all in there, and I'm just going to set that aside and let that dry while I make the tags. This first session in this series is almost over. Now, as I look at my book, I'm realizing that I have 2 tags to make. You actually might have more. Let's talk about the materials. Remember that stash of items I showed you earlier? It has postcards from magazines. My stack actually had several kinds of playing cards and business cards. You may have something different. I end up deciding that I'm going to use the playing cards with the floral design on it and the blue background. I felt like it went along with the theme of my book. once you've made your selection, you will want to be sure that the size fits into the pockets that you've provided. You may find yourself having to trim the card that you have available. If you decide to use one of the magazine postcard inserts, you may fold it over to have it become more sturdy. If you choose something else, you may spend more time decorating your cards. I'm kind of fortunate in this situation where I feel like I want to leave that design. Again, as you consider how to decorate the tags, you are welcome to try anything to add color or texture to yours. You can see that I am covering mine in glue, and I decide to use two different colored tissues, one for each card. You can tear yours up like we did in the very beginning if you want to do that. Use your imagination. Here you can see I'm scrunching it up. I love the texture of tissue paper when it's scrunched up. So while the glue is wet, I'm pushing in the tissue paper to create that texture and just keep pressing it down till I get it the way I want. Then I'm going to set that aside and do the second one. I kept the tissue papers the same color as what I was using in the main project, just so that I could have some continuity between the two pieces. Remember, you want to get a good coating of glue on your card. And one way to find out is to kind of hold your card up to see if it is shiny, to make sure that the whole thing is covered up. Again, I lay the tissue paper on it and kind of press in the tissue, creating a texture. I'm using the palm of my hand because that is the clean part. My fingers get quite sticky. You can notice that I can still see the eights of spade there, but in the next series, I will go ahead and add some more texture there. Now, again, here I am tearing my tissue paper off the edges, and because I like that rough edge, but you can take a pair of scissors and just trim those edges if you like that. Some of the edges weren't perfect, but I have learned to relax about that and make friends with whatever happens. I don't get too stressed out about it. It just becomes part of my style of art. Remember, each one of these projects is unique and individual because we are all different. You may not choose to do decoupage or collage on your cards or tags, whatever we'd like to call them. You might decide to do a drawing or do some painting. Anything goes when you're working with mixed media. We want to make each piece unique and different. Now that I have that color on there, I decide that that's about all I want to do in this situation. So I need to poke holes in my cards or my tags. So you'll see that I am looking to decide which card is going to go into what pocket, because one is on the side and I want my little string to be on the side of the card, and then the other one I want to be at the top. So I'm poking a hole here with a very tiny little hole punch. Maybe if you don't have that, you could use a nail and a hammer or a sharp pen to stick a hole in there. And again, you can use anything. I'm doing string in this case, a very fine yarn, and I'm tying a simple knot to hold it secure. Now, if I have a larger hole to put my threads and yarn in, I will sometimes add more than one string just to add a little bit of extra texture and extra color. Now you see in the second card, I actually attach the string differently. I will fold it over in the center and place that fold into the hole. It's a little bit of a challenge for me at this point because the hole is so small, but if your hole is larger, it won't be such a problem. So I pull that through and then I place my finger in that hole and push through the two ends, and then I pull it tight. I really like that fastening better than the other one, but I wanted to show both kinds. The last thing I want to do is just place my tags inside the pockets to be sure that they fit and they're exactly the way I want them. Then I will start removing my paper clips because it's had plenty of time to dry and they're all secure edges. I also just take a look, last glance over the whole project to make sure it's exactly the way I want it before I get ready for the next session. I sure hope that you've had as much fun as I have doing this project. I look forward to showing you what else we can do with this little book.